My name is Thomas Tam. I'm currently an attorney doing criminal defense litigation. I was hired as an attorney at the Department of Justice and wound up at what was then called the Office of Intelligence Policy and Review. And after 9/11, my unit was assigned to go talk to the victims' families of 9/11 in New York. And so we were gathering victim impact information. And it was actually really largely as a result of that that I decided that I wanted to do something more directly going after terrorists. I mean, I thought it was kind of my patriotic duty to go after the people that had attacked my country. And I thought it would be really rewarding. There's a court at the time located in the Department of Justice that literally meets in a bank vault. So there can't be any surreptitious listening of what's going on in there. And we applied for through the court to listen to people's phones, essentially. Let's say someone was picked up by our troops in Afghanistan or the CIA in Afghanistan, and they had phone numbers in their pockets, and those phone numbers were listed to people in the United States. And so with that information that the person's picked up in Afghanistan, we would go before a court and say, here's why we think this person may be connected with terrorism. And if the court said, yes, we believe there's a probable cause, they would issue a warrant, and we would be able to listen. The government would be able to gather intelligence, gather surveillance, email addresses, telephones, and we could do that for 90 days. So we were working with FBI agents who had developed probable cause to believe someone in the country was connected with terrorist organizations. But there was a certain smaller number of phone numbers that would come into this office that had to be handled separately and kind of given special attention. And we didn't call it any special code word or name. It was just known as the program. I just found that really curious, and I started asking people that I worked with if they knew any of the details about the program. You know, do you know why one phone number is in the program and one phone number is not in the program? Basically, I was convinced that something illegal was going on. So I asked a supervisor, and she said to me that she just assumed that what was being done was illegal.
I knew that if I remained silent, that I would be an accessory to a crime, the subversion of our own Constitution, and warrantless spying and surveillance.
People work within the system,
I went to the Office of General Counsel.
work their chain of command.
I went to the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence.
They expect that someone is going to see the light along the way.
I went to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, and I went to the Department of Defense Inspector General's office. I was being told it's all legal. I ultimately chose, I've made a fateful decision, to go to the press. So I shared what was unclassified anonymously about the government's warrantless wiretapping with a reporter. Her name is Siobhan Gorman, and I wrote for the Baltimore Sun. I knew that I could be fired, but again, as an American, I made that choice. There was a May 2006 article about warrantless surveillance of Americans. That really, no doubt, caused a real stir at NSA. I'm getting ready for work, and I'm looking out my bedroom window, and I see a bunch of cars pull up. And a dozen agents are streaming across my front yard.
Thomas Drake accused of leaking classified information.
You can imagine in that moment, they've come for me. I'll knock on the door.
Agents raiding his home in Howard County.
My wife and son, I still remember the look on their faces. They had a warrant, they had a search warrant. My life at that point was turned completely upside down. I met the chief prosecutor at a secret FBI facility in Maryland, where the prosecutor basically threatened me with spending the rest of my life in prison if I didn't cooperate, otherwise we'll throw the book at you. And I was charged under the Espionage Act.
The Espionage Act, which has been around since 1917, was designed to stop spies.
But a spy is not a mid-level bureaucrat who notices tens of millions of dollars going down a rat hole somewhere, and after notifying his superiors and getting nowhere, eventually drops a dime and calls a newspaper. That's a whistleblower, that's not a spy.
I'm spending tens and tens of thousands of dollars during this time period on a private attorney. I had to take out a second mortgage on my house. I had to basically clear out half of my retirement account from the government just to pay for all this, plus a whole number of other expenses. And I happened to read an article, it was an op-ed in the LA Times, penned by Jessalyn Radak.
When I heard that a whistleblower had been indicted, I immediately did an op-ed on the difference between leaking and whistleblowing and discussed Tom Drake's case and why what he allegedly did qualified as whistleblowing, not leaking.
She understood exactly what was at stake, and it turned out way before anybody else did.
His case, if it were to be won, would have to occur both in the courtroom and in the court of public opinion.
And she began to strategically turn the tide.
I said, I'm going to nominate him for Rittenhour Prize for Truth-Telling as a first stop.
I did not take an oath to support and defend government illegalities.
Followed shortly by the Jane Merritt article.
Jessalyn Radak called me up one day and she said, I have something that I think might interest you.
If we could get an article in the New Yorker, I thought it would be appropriate for him to be able to speak during that article.
Dealing with a source who's being prosecuted for leaking. I could not talk on the phone with Tom Drake. I had to fly across the country and meet people in sort of unmarked hotel rooms in order to try to get the details of that story. And it does not feel kind of like America, land of the free press.
To date, it remains the most comprehensive summary of what happened. And then the 60 Minutes segment.
He's been charged under the Espionage Act and could spend the rest of his life in prison.
I began to have grave concerns about the decisions that were made to bypass the Constitution willfully and deliberately.
A high-profile failure for the Justice Department. Federal prosecutors today dropped nearly all of the charges against Thomas Drake.
A former NSA official accused of mishandling classified data strikes a plea deal today.
He's only pleading guilty to a misdemeanor count of exceeding authorized use of a computer.
It's the legal equivalent of a parking ticket.
It had nothing to do with classified. It had nothing to do with retention.
There was a judge with the integrity to say, you're not doing the right thing, prosecutor.
The federal judge in this case actually berated the prosecutors. He berated the government for years of persecution, the threat of 35 years behind bars, and the charges were suddenly dropped.
So the whole case did fall apart, and of its own weight, I think, really.
The government does tend to overreact and overcharge and over-dramatize.
He was vindicated in the end, essentially, but had his life, for the moment, ruined.
It's extremely dangerous in America right now to be right as a whistleblower when the government is so wrong. So speaking truth to power is now a criminal act. One's rights, given history, it's too easy for others to take them away.
When a government gains new powers, they never release them. They always use times of emergency. They use special circumstances to create exceptions in our thinking, to say that, but this time it's different. It's not different. What's different are the people in power and what they want.
Now knock on the door. They've come for me.
Agents raiding his home.
I knew that I was being watched and I knew that I was being investigated.
They actually brought down the presidential home because they thought I might be on board. And there's no precedent for that. It never happened before.
I remember telling my immediate supervisor, what are we doing? And here he is telling me, don't worry about it. And don't ask any more questions.